Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I saw the film Weapons, and now I want to tell you about it. Weapons is a horror film about a class full of kids going missing and their community trying to find answers. Cregger of Barbarian and Whitest Kids You Know fame wrote and directed the film, which stars Julia Garner, Josh Brolin, and Alden Ehrenreich. Okay, let's start with a description because this film is a little unusual. It starts with a 5-minute exposition dump that describes the kids going missing. From there, the film tells us 6 stories from different members of the community. The stories each fill in little details of the grander narrative, and then in the final story, things come to a head. The first story is from the perspective of the class's teacher. We see her go about her day, look into aspects of the case, and experience some spooky happenings. Then the film takes us through 5 more people's daily lives. Each of the stories brings an escalation to the situation and a little bit more clarity about what's going on. From an acting perspective, the film uses an ensemble cast and doesn't really have main characters. All of the characters are people in the community who are affected by the kid's disappearance. There's Justine, the teacher, Archer, the father of one of the students, a local cop working the case called Paul, the principal of the school, Marcus, a student at the school called Alex, and a junkie named James who is the first to discover where the kids went. They're all playing normal people caught in a horrific situation. We see them react to scary events and fight for their lives. Some of them get to act out a different part toward the end, and do a great job of acting like mindless thralls hell-bent on killing their target. From all of the cast, we get a little bit of grief, a lot of fear reactions, and a few action-y moments where they run away or try to fight to survive. Visually, the film takes place in a small town and watches people go about their daily lives. For the teacher, that means going to school, getting groceries, hanging out at a bar, and then following her student as he walks home. Each story follows a different person's daily life after the incident. When they're not running errands, they're talking with the other characters about what's happening or investigating one of the aspects of the case. There's a little bit of metaphorical imagery during dream sequences and a lot of straightforward long takes to try and build up tension. Overall, it's a fairly mundane affair that relies on the idea of a monster being scarier if it's in our own backyard. For horror moments, they have a lot of jump scares, some gore moments where characters are mutilated or dismembered, and a few zombie-esque scenes of people ripping and tearing flesh from other people. Music-wise, the film is pretty quiet. It does use music from time to time to punctuate a tense moment or to fill out a montage scene. They also break out the songs when they need to add a touch of emotion. Mostly, they just throw in a few instrumental beats and a little bit of ambient noise to help set the mood, and then let the silence do the rest. Which brings me to my review. The story has a great premise, but terrible execution. There's a really scary monster at the core of this story, and one that would have been fantastic to see explored. Instead, the film spends an hour and a half re-explaining the same events over and over again until it finally decides to move on. Then they wrap everything up in a lightning round and disappear into the night without answering a single question. The characters are all either underdeveloped or just straight up unlikable. It's hard to root for them or care about them. The monster is developed a little bit towards the end, but they never give a real explanation about where they come from, how their powers work, or why any of this is happening. Even the solution to the problem was fairly lame. It comes out of nowhere and is unironically ridiculous. The film also commits the cardinal sin of filmmaking. It's set in a genre that it barely takes advantage of. Calling it a horror is kind of misleading because really it's just a bunch of tense situations with a little bit of gore in the last 2 chapters. Cast-wise, the performances are solid with good fear reactions and a lot of emotion. No one really stands out for their performance due to the time constraints put on them, but all of them do a great job. The biggest performance in the film comes from the antagonist played by Amy Madigan. She's the type of villain to lure her victims in with a pathetic form and then bite their heads off. Her role sees her do some over-the-top, almost comedic line deliveries, and a lot of swapping back and forth between sweet and vicious. Like the others, she doesn't get much time to develop her character, but by virtue of playing the monster, she ends up with the most memorable performance. Visually, the film is alright. It sets the story up well, does a good job getting the message across, and has some decent horror aesthetics going on. They make each of these people's mundane lives feel like a horrifically tense situation. When it comes time to actually do the horror parts, they show off some great makeup work and some nice practical effects for the gore. There aren't many kills in the film, but each death has a big impact. That said, they happen so infrequently that it's hard to even call this a horror film. It's more like it dipped into the horror genre as an afterthought. Ironically, the hardest parts to sit through are the setup scenes for what the monster is about to do. Like there's one scene of her sneaking up on a sleeping character that just makes your skin crawl. Every part of the approach is intense and horrible, and then what she actually does is pretty tame and almost comedic. Sound-wise, the film feels intense. It has good music being used effectively throughout the film. They do a great job of backing the emotional moments or trying to make the action even more hype. They also do a fantastic job of building up tension during the different parts of the story. Sometimes it's so intense your heart will be pumping from the music alone. They also give each story their own flavor. Personally, I was really disappointed in this film. I saw all the hype about it online and thought, great, I can't wait to be scared. Then I sat there and waited, and the scary never really came. There's a couple of creepy moments, but they're few and far between. The only thing that even remotely made me feel upset was watching the people stab themselves in the face, and even that was pretty tame. There wasn't any blood, and they weren't going that deep. The story was the most disappointing part. I thought they'd actually go somewhere or explain something, but it takes forever to get through the barest of stories imaginable. They barely answered the 5 W's. As for a rating, I'd give this movie a 5 out of 10. It's got some decent acting in it, and the visual journey and soundtrack are competent. The problem is that the writing is bloated and gimmicky. Remember, these are just my thoughts on the film. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Bye-bye!